Good morning, everyone, and I'd like to welcome you and call to order our Lucan Biddulph Council meeting for Tuesday, August the 8th. And this is one of our two morning meetings that we host. So I want to thank staff and council and those participating in the meeting for making arrangements to join us for our morning meeting. For those watching online, Councillor Westman is unable to join us today, and Councillor Hodgins is joining us virtually. He is in attendance, but does have a bit of a wonky reception. So he is here and I'm able to acknowledge him, and he will try to turn his video on so anybody watching will be able to see that he's there. He's turned it on now, so you know that he's here, and he will be able to participate as if he was here in person. So moving on, any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Okay, seeing none. We have to go into a public meeting this morning, and we have to do that to sit as the Committee of Adjustment under the Planning Act. And I would ask for a mover and a seconder to move us into that at 2 minutes after 9. Councillor Regan and Deputy Mayor Manders, all in favor, and that is carried. We have one application in front of us this morning. It is a minor variance application, and at this time, I will turn it over to Dan to take us through it.
So through the chair, thanks, Mayor and members of the committee. So the first application that we have here today, or only application, is an application for a minor variance, which is A4 2023 for a property that's located at 34898 Richmond Street. So the property is located on the east side of Richmond, and they are seeking a minor variance to the minimum distance separation formula, or MDS2, looking to establish a new livestock barn for dairy milking. And the variance in this case is not for the barn, but rather for an open manure storage pit that is located east of the proposed location for the barn. So based on the MDS formula requirements, the applicant would need 249 meters for the open storage pit from neighboring sensitive land uses, in this case being the neighboring residents. But they are proposing a minimum MDS setback of 225 meters. So we have looked at the variance against the provincial policy statement, as well as the county official plan, Lucan's official plan, as well as the zoning bylaw. So what I would note is, generally speaking, when we do look at MDS variances, there is an OMAFRA guideline that's available to municipalities to give us a bit of guidance as to what we should look at when we're considering these types of variances. And the reason why I say that is because the PPS, the county OP, as well as Lucan's OP, basically say that we shall not vary MDS. So the guiding document does give us the general opinions and opportunities that we could consider the potential to vary MDS. And in all those instances, it's typically a situation where there's some sort of natural heritage feature that's associated with the property, which would require you to locate any type of development outside of that area, or if there's hazardous lands that are also available. In this case, in review of the property, I didn't note any natural heritage features or any hazard lands, and more so just a nature of the development based on the request of the landowner to place the manure storage pit in close proximity to the new proposed barn location. So with that said, I am recommending that the application for minor variance be denied based on not meeting the 4 tests of the Planning Act. So if there's any questions of the committee or anyone, I'm certainly here and available to answer those. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dan. We do have the applicant in the audience. Did you want to say anything at this time, Mr. or Mrs. Peters? Okay. Any questions of the committee at this time? Deputy Mayor Manders.
Just, there appears to be enough room to comply. Is that correct, though, if they chose to?
Yeah, so through the chair, all they would need to do in this particular case is move the manure pit back to that 249 meters as opposed to 225 meters. It doesn't appear to be any hindrance or natural heritage features or hazard lands on the lot that would necessitate pushing the pit forward.
Councillor Regan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Dan, just for my own knowledge, what's the difference between a minor and a major variance? In this case, it's 24 meters, right?
Yeah, so through the chair, minor is not necessarily always based on a total figure value of a percent increase. It's more based on what's the potential impact to neighboring properties in this particular case. So when we look at what is minor in this particular case, we look at what's the potential impact to adjacent landowners. When it comes to MDS, the impact is certainly noise and odor and dust.
Okay, all right, thank you, thanks, okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, Mr. Peters, did you want to say something? I would ask you to come up to the chair and then just turn the microphone on, and it's just that button there.
So yeah, we're proposing to have them in your pit essentially closer to the dairy barn because the landscape slopes up. And we're trying to prevent having to put in a pump chamber and having to pump them in your uphill to go into the pit. So that's, yeah, it's a little bit for savings for not needing a pump chamber, not needing the extra hydro. And yeah, right.
But this is a new barn that you're building?
It's a new barn that we're building out.
So to Deputy Mayor's question, is there ability to build it somewhere else that would allow you to meet the requirements and not have the pump?
We could look at moving it. It's just that's where we kind of had planned to put the dairy barn.
And the ground
The ground starts to slope up, so then we require more fill and everything to raise the barn up.
Any other comments?
You know, you'll see in the vote for myself, but it is unfortunate, the extra expense, but I think meeting the compliance is important. So that's all. That's my call, you know, I'll just be honest with you. So.
Yeah, I think that the planner, Dan, does a good job at outlining how, you know, we are really tight when it comes to MDS standards and how we have to really conform to those. It is unfortunate. I think that you're looking at an added expense, but when it comes to OMAFRA's regulations and our PPS, the PPS that we follow and ROP, I think our hands are pretty tied on this one. Okay. One last call for comments or questions. So there is a recommendation in front of us that the application for minor variance A-4/2023 filed by Tuan Peters for relief from the Township of Lucan Biddulph's comprehensive zoning bylaw to permit a reduced MDS2 setback for a manure pit for a property legally described as Lot 18 Concession 1 in the Township of Lucan Biddulph, County of Middlesex, and municipally known as 34898 Richmond Street be denied. And the reasons for that is the intent of the Township of Lucan Biddulph's official plan is not maintained. The intent of the Township of Lucan Biddulph's zoning bylaw is not maintained, and the variance is not considered minor in nature. And the variance is not desirable for the appropriate use and development of the lands. A mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Hodgins and Councillor Regan. All in favor? And that is carried. And with that, that ends our public meeting, and I would ask for a mover and a seconder to rise and return to our regular council meeting at 9 minutes or at 11 minutes after 9. Deputy Mayor Manders and Councillor Regan, all in favor, and that's carried. And then Mr. Peters, then you can work with Dan on next steps. Okay. Okay, moving on. We do have a delegation this morning, and as we're clearing out the room, I would ask that Mr. Rick Orr from Orr Insurance Brokers join us. He's been involved in the RFP process that we've gone through regarding insurance renewal. And so, Mr. Orr, it's great to meet you in person. Thank you for joining us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning. My name is Rick Orr from Orr Insurance and Investment. We're head offices in Stratford. We have about 70 staff over 6 locations. And earlier this year, we were appointed to act as your insurance broker and risk manager. Part of that process was to do an RFP of your insurance program. We worked very closely with Catherine, closer than Catherine expected, I think. Thank you. And Ron, and we're able to put together a comprehensive package that brought in 3 competitive bids for your insurance program. The successful bidder is IPE, or Intact Public Entities, or Frank Cowan, whichever you all want to refer to them. They provided the best proposed coverages, the best proposed risk management services, and they were the cheapest price by 30% to the next competitive bid. From last year, we standardized your deductible to a $10,000 deductible across all of your major coverages. The building values were inflated 11% to try and keep up with inflationary reconstruction costs these days, which generated a net 6% increase over last year. In working with Ron and Catherine, we came to discover some other risk management areas that we'd like to focus on in the near future to transfer as much risk away from the municipality as we can. One of the services that IPE, that's old habit, die hard. IPE committed to is inspecting 5 or 6 of your buildings every year. And the first one they're going to inspect is the newly renovated community center to make sure we've got it insured to proper values. We haven't increased it since the construction, but it was kind of a guess, a best guess. So we'll get a proper appraisal done and make sure that's insured properly. I think that's really all the report, unless I'm happy to take some questions if there are any.
Great. Well, thank you very much for that, Mr. Orr. Questions from council at this time? Deputy Mayor Manders.
Just a comment and one question, I think. Just how many would have been reached out to that decided not to bid on that, or was it just the 3 that did bid?
We only reached out to 3
Okay.
and all 3 did bid.
And looking at the differences, I mean, this tells me in future council of years to come that you'd never want to not go out for bid. I mean, it's amazing the spread on this. You know, we have other tenders come in, usually it's close, but I mean, this leads me to believe you'd never want to just roll over your insurance year after year. I mean, looking at this is ridiculous.
The standard is about every 5 years unless there's a significant change.
But
no
the spread in that in the same
spread is
ass.
huge,
That's what
yeah.
I'm saying. The spread, I mean, I'd be sick to my stomach for AON or BFL. And all of a sudden over the years, again, I was really shocked at the spread. That's just a comment. And again, leads me to believe you don't want to get too complacent with your insurance. So just comment.
I would just say they all have different risk appetites. And it is interesting. And that's some of the stuff that we're going to work on to make sure that you stay competitive going forward. And I'm sorry, I interrupted, but the standard is about every 5 years, unless there's a dramatic change. It's just the work involved. None of them would want to look at this every year. Yeah, so.
Councillor Regan.
Thank you. If I may, Madam Mayor, when you mentioned that the community center is going to be the first on the list to be inspected to make sure that we've got the proper insurance, what other buildings, what other assets are you looking at in the near future?
I'm sorry, I don't have I could grab the list of the top 5, but each year they've scheduled 5. I think the fire halls one of the fire halls is in the first year. They generally pick the highest ones that are most susceptible to being underinsured to make sure that they're okay.
Okay.
But it is actually scheduled for over the next 3 years of what those assets will be.
Thank you.
I'm happy to provide that. I think Catherine, actually, no, you don't, Catherine, you don't have it. I'm happy to provide it through Catherine. She can get it to you.
All right. Okay. No, I would just think something I think council would like to see. It's just
Sure.
what we're going to be looking at and just if we're missing anything. So.
And I understand that really over the next 3 to 4 years, they'll hit almost every building that you own.
Right.
So.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
So back just on the 5 years. So are we committed? Is this now a 5-year commitment that we've got with IPE? Or how does that work?
The RFP says that we're looking at a 5-year term unless service standards fall short or pricing changes dramatically. If all of a sudden we get a 50% increase come through, then we'll go back out. Or if we can't get response on anything and their service levels have changed, or something dramatic happens. But generally, we look at it as a 5-year just to make sure that we're still where we need to be.
No, thank you for that. And then just with regards to the last few years, there's no question municipalities have been hit with incredible increases to insurance. And I think that that was probably, the precipitous for us to say, okay, like, let's just see what's out in the market. And I know that you can't look into crystal ball. I'm sure you have one, just like the rest of us do. So I'm certainly anything that you say, I'm not holding you to. But just going forward, like, how do you see the market leveling out? Can municipalities expect to see the sort of increases that we've seen? And I understand a lot of that, has to do with claims and that sort of history. But just wondering what your opinion is going forward.
Have we got all morning to sit and have a chat? Yeah. You'll be very pleased to know that Ron and Catherine asked the exact same question. For you specifically, there's two components to your insurance pricing. One would be your own claims experience, and the other is what the industry is experiencing. For the last number of years, liability has been the big concern that's been driving municipal insurance programs. It's interesting that in the last couple of years, that conversation has shifted away from liability and it's to property. The insurance landscape has changed, and it's being driven by reinsurance. Insurers buy insurance on their insurance as well. They can't take all of that risk, and reinsurance is a global market. And we've always historically spoken about, the floods in Europe and the typhoons in Asia, where suddenly we're talking about, the storms on the east coast of Canada. And last time I had this conversation, you could actually smell the smoke in the air. So now we're suddenly into Canadian wildfires. So the property insurance is a conversation right now that's more challenging than the liability. But that's a smaller part of the premium. So the last number of years, what we've been seeing is, as someone told me recently, budget for 15, hope for 10. They didn't like that answer very much, but I would see, I don't think inflation is going to come down for the next couple of years. So our building values are going to have to continue to increase. Unfortunately, that means claims costs increase. So there will be increases going forward, but I would, with a good experience, I don't think we'll see the giant increases that have been there.
Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate that perspective. One last call. Any questions for Rick while he's here? Okay, thank you very much. That was great. Thank you for joining us again.
I'd just like to say thank you to Ron and Catherine, because they really did put a lot of work into this, a lot of phone calls, a lot of Zoom calls, and they certainly earned their keep with you guys. So thank you guys.
I appreciate that. As you say, when we go to market for something like this, it's not an easy process. So there's a lot to go into this. So certainly we do appreciate the work, obviously, that staff has done to support you, and then vice versa with the work that you've done. So thank you very much. Okay. Okay. All right. Have a good morning. On to our minutes. We've got a set of minutes in front of us from our July 11th meeting. And if nothing needed to be corrected, then I would ask for a mover and a seconder to adopt those and approve those minutes as circulated. Deputy Mayor Manders and Councillor Hodgins. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. On to business arising. We did add one item to our business arising, and that was the bylaw enforcement discussion. And I know that Arnie Marsman's joining us later, and he had hoped to have something but for the, this meeting, but he hasn't. So we'll look for that to begin in the fall of 2023. Based on the minutes that we had in July, from July, was there anything else that council wanted added to business arising? Okay. On to correspondence. You've got a list of items that we've received since July, and nothing's been pulled by staff. And was there any items that council wanted to speak to? Okay, I just had one, and that was just on the county council highlights. In the July meeting, I had opportunity in my other role to be able to recognize 5 paramedics that received the Ontario Medal of Bravery. And their stories, it's based on 2 incidents. 2 paramedics received it for one incident and 3 for another one. And I would encourage you to take a few minutes and go back and watch that council meeting to learn a little bit more about why these paramedics received the Ontario Medal of Bravery. This sort of recognition is obviously not given out lightly or on a regular basis, and to have 5 paramedics in one service recognized is really quite something, and something that we're incredibly proud of. So as I say, if you've got a few minutes, go back and watch the county council meeting for that. With that, I would ask for a mover and a seconder to receive those items of correspondence for information. Councillor Regan and Councillor Hodgins, all in favor, and that's carried. On to committee reports. Blue Water. Thank you. CEDC.
Madam Mayor, if I may, I'll have a report for September 5th.
Yep.
Please. Thank you.
Thank you. Nothing from Lake Huron, nothing from our fire boards, although I do believe in September, our Fire Master Services Plan will be brought forward to council. At ABCA, Councillor Hodgins.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Nothing specific to report. You have the board meeting minutes from June 15th attached and the agenda from the July 20th meeting.
Great, thank you for that. Anything from Parks and Recreation?
Madam Mayor, we have a meeting August 24th at 6 o'clock, and I'd like to present the report on September 5th, if I may.
Okay, yep, thank
Thank
you. I might actually just go back to the ABCA and Upper Thames. I'm just wondering if we can reach out to Councillor Heeman from Thames Centre. He's our representative for this term for Upper Thames, and maybe just get an update on at some point in the fall with Upper Thames and where they're at. It would be great to hear from them. On to staff reports. Okay, we've got the first report. It's pay equity and compensation. And Tina, you're going to present this one.
Thank you. In Ron's absence, I'll just kind of review what's in his report here. We recently went to RFP for the pay equity and compensation review, and 3 bids were received. The lowest bid coming in with ML Consulting, and that this item was budgeted in our 2023 budget for 30,000, and it did come in considerably under budget. So staff has awarded that tender to ML Consulting, and they've started to work on that project. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Tina. Any questions from council? Okay, then I would ask for a mover and a seconder to receive that report for information. Councillor Hodgins and Councillor Regan. All in favor? And that's carried. And then continuing on with our insurance discussion, I think Catherine's going to take this report.
Yep. So this is just a summary basically of what Rick Orr just spoke to you about. We went to market to see where we're at with our insurance. There was gathering a whole bunch of information, and staff worked along getting it from all other staff and putting all the information they requested and answering questions that came back from the 3 bidders. And then so this report is just to formally accept that bid from Intact Public Entities for that amount, because our renewal is September 1st. So we wanted to do that ahead of that date, and shouldn't be too much to transition because that's our current provider. So we're happy with that. And it's right on. It's not too much from what we paid last year, but again, with that deep dive and given some, with Rick's guidance and getting some better coverage. And then we'll continue to work with Rick, as you mentioned, on risk management items that came up that could put us in a better position going forward. So that's all I had to say.
Okay, great. Thank you, Catherine. Any questions for Catherine on this? Okay, certainly, as was said when Rick was presenting, going through this process, there's a lot of work that goes into putting it together. It's not an RFP for a lawnmower. So certainly appreciate all of the background that you, Catherine, have done, and of course, Ron, in supporting this. And it is, to the deputy mayor's point, it's certainly since I've been on council, we haven't gone through this. So I think it was a worthwhile exercise to go through. It is our current provider, but still to have this open and transparent procedure, I think, as I say, is a worthwhile exercise, especially in the environment that we're in. So with that, I would ask for a mover and a seconder for the recommended motion in front of you, that we receive the report for information, and further that council award the 2023 that's supposed to be 24 general insurance renewal to intact public entities as per their August 1st, 2023 submission in the amount of $238,108. A mover and a seconder for that, please. Deputy Mayor Manders and Councillor Regan, all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Tina, did you have anything else from your office?
I don't at this time. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so joining us via Zoom with a building update is our CBO, Arnie Marsman. Thank you for joining us this morning. Arnie, I know that you've got a busy morning, so appreciate you being able to join us. So I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor, and good morning, Council. So I'll start just introducing the staff report that I have before you today. The staff report summarizes the first half activities and the second quarter summary for building permitting in Lucan Biddulph. And the report may appear as being sort of ho-hum, but I think a couple of things to point out to Council. Our year-to-date permits for singles and townhouses were 6 plus 13 there. Those 19 units were all started and approved in the second quarter. If you scroll down to the bottom of that table, you'll see that year-to-date we've had 82 permits, and 75 of those 82 were in the second quarter this year. So the report shows, we're not quite at the pace that we were last year, but the second quarter certainly bounced back from a very slow first quarter. So I think that's a good news report there in itself. And what we're seeing right now in the market is more of the same. Townhouse units is especially popular, and there certainly is demand out there for dwellings. We just need to get interest rates under control and costs under control, and things are definitely looking up. So I just wanted to point those numbers out to Council, at least, that we're seeing a good bounce back the second quarter this year. Further in the report, I do provide some summaries, comparisons of what we've seen this year in the first half compared to previous years in Lucan Biddulph. Generally, you can say we're on track with previous years. Certainly, we've benefited from some big booming years in the 2020, 2021. So it's tough to compare to those directly, but things are looking up, like I said. And the third table shows sort of a summary of what Lucan Biddulph has seen this year versus what we're presenting to other municipalities in the first half. And you can see that some municipalities have fared very strongly. Some are still recovering from the residential decline. Middlesex Centre, certainly we've seen in the first half of this year in Middlesex Centre 68 dwellings compared to 146 in the same first half. But Lucan has done really well. It's fared the course really well, I think. Now I guess that's my summary on this report. And I did want to address council with regards to the request for a bylaw enforcement report. Apologize for not getting something to you sooner. And I hope to have something to you today regarding bylaw enforcement, but unfortunately just it didn't work out. But I did speak to Tina, and I would like to get that onto the next council meeting. We've been working with the county solicitor regarding our building bylaw, and the building bylaw really is completed. The county solicitor is just making a couple small changes. So I'd like to bring that to the next council meeting, hopefully 1st of September, and or the first week of September. And we'll take that to all of our partner municipalities. So I look forward to bringing that with the bylaw report, hopefully to the next council meeting. Otherwise, I'm open to any questions with this report or otherwise.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that, Arnie. Questions for Arnie on what he has presented to us this morning? Councillor Regan.
If I may, Madam Mayor, thank you. Morning, Arnie. I'm just wondering, it says that staff anticipates the improvement to continue in the second half of 2023. I wonder, is there any indication how much this will improve?
Through the mayor, there really is not. There's some developments, I think, throughout the county that have really been anticipating starting. And I think those developments will move quickly with the first 3 to 5 starts. It depends. There definitely is demand out there. It depends on the price point that the builders and the developers go for, whether it's lot prices or other variables that go into the cost of housing. But I'm hoping, cautiously optimistic, that we have seen the bottom of the slowdown and we're working our way back now. I don't see it taking off like it did in 2021 at this time, but if rates do take a decline, 1% over the next year and a half, I think we'll see a big change.
All right. Thank you, Arnie. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Any other questions for Arnie at this time? Okay, thank you very much for joining us, Arnie. Appreciate that. And we look forward to seeing you in September, I guess.
Yeah, look forward to it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. With that, I would ask for a mover and a seconder to receive Arnie's information or Arnie's report for information, please. Councillor Hodgins and Deputy Mayor Manders. All in favor? And that's carried. On to finance, Catherine.
Thank you. So my first report is to provide council with the budget actual results for the first half of 2023. Of course, you're always welcome to ask me questions about financials at any time, but this is formally putting it in the package for your information. So I know there's some seasonality to some of our numbers, but as a rule of thumb, we could be around 50% of budget. Would be a good way to look at some of these numbers. And then there's always a lot of information and adjustments that happen towards at the end of the year and after year end when the auditor does their work. But looking at, I don't have too many things to note other than I put on my summary in there some things that we knew about from other reports, such as having to have the greater rental that put us over budget in that category. There's some in the Parks and Rec department. There's some good news stories there with summer day camp continues to be quite popular. So we're seeing higher than budgeted revenues, although there will be costs on the other side as you need the staffing to allow for those numbers and equipment for that. Another issues there that happened due to weather and the Parks and Rec budget was hard to budget for, so we're still monitoring that because with the new building and the effects of what's needed as far as what kind of new utility usage and the uptake on rental of the space and all that kind of stuff. So we'll have a better handle on that as we move into 2024 budget, hopefully, but we still need there are only a few months of experience, so it might be a bit before we really get some fine tuning on that, but I think Paul can speak to more about the usage of the building, but so far I think it's okay. The pool seems to be being used more than we anticipated, so hopefully that stays on track for the last month, the July and August as well. So that's all I really have. If you have any questions, I can try to answer them now or look in the details for you later.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Questions for Catherine on her report? No, just I just want to, we spoke and you talked about the Parks and Rec budget. And during our budget discussions, we talked about keeping track of, you know, what the cost of keeping our ice in over the summer is. And I just want to make sure that we're finding a way to track it. I know it's difficult with utilities and everything, but has that tracking started to make sure that when it comes to budget discussions, we can include that in our thoughts?
To you, Madam Mayor. Yes, we're collecting data as we speak for operating hours, and our refrigeration company has offered to send the numbers to their experts to try and generate a good balance of the cost compared to when we're going to send them some more in fall, winter month.
And then like also included in that, of course, is your staff time and everything, right? That you're okay. Okay, just want to make sure we're on track for that. All right, any other questions at this time for Catherine? Okay, so with that, we do have a recommended motion to receive Catherine's report for information. A mover and a seconder for that, please. Deputy Mayor Manders and Councillor Regan, all in favor, and that's carried. And Catherine, did you have a verbal?
Yes, so in further down the package, we have a bylaw 34-2023, and that is at this time to establish a debenture for the pool renovation, because that's been complete. So we have the final numbers. We can go ahead and get that going. And the amount of the loan will be for $1,294,694 over 25 years at a rate of 4.85%. And that's with Infrastructure Ontario. Because as you remember, last year we did a pre-loan with them so that we could borrow against it if we needed to for cash flow during those construction of the projects. We didn't have to tap into that, but now this is how we're going to fund the project now that it's done. For this is the pool, and the other two will come later this year, but this specific one is just regarding the pool loan.
Okay, okay, thanks. Yep. Deputy Mayor Manders.
So on the other two projects, there's still money left to tap into at that lower rate, or will that be reassessed at that time?
The rate is established when we tell them that we're ready for a loan, and they look at the rates on that day. So a few weeks ago, they gave us this rate, and we had to agree to it basically. So it comes at whatever the rates are at the time when we're ready to proceed.
Oh, okay, thanks.
So,
Any other questions for Catherine? Okay, thank you very much for that update, Catherine. Anything from planning?
Through the chair, thanks, Madam Mayor, members of council. So I do have a few verbal updates for you today. Ron had asked me just to kind of go through a few of the items that we have in terms of planning. First being kind of an update as to where we are for planning with site plan approvals, just knowing that that is now a delegated authority to staff. So the first item is the approval of 315 Main Street, the site plan amendment. So what we were looking at in that particular case was that the developer was moving the existing retail commercial building to accommodate a drive-through in a different fashion than was originally approved. As everyone knows, there is a McDonald's that is going in there. Rest assured, it is going in there. It is now approved. The site plan has been amended, and it appears driving by this morning, they're prepping for beginning the foundation work there. So you'll be looking forward to that soon. The second one that we have going on is the site plan application for the Asable Fields townhouse development. So that is a 68 unit townhome development site. It will be a condo site. I'm not sure if anyone's taken a drive down Scott's Drive recently, but it will effectively be the same product. That's the 9 townhomes that are being constructed there right now. We just have a few engineering and planning items that we're addressing with them now, and then we'll go through the site plan agreement process. So that should be something that will move forward relatively quickly here. And that's it that we have for site plan applications. Another update is that the township did submit their application to the Housing Accelerator Fund. So that's a program that's being offered through CMHC, through the federal government, and looking at opportunities to provide funding for municipalities that can basically achieve rates of development beyond what their traditional 5-year averages are. So what we were looking at is how can we best achieve additional development in Lucan Biddulph beyond what we've done in the past 5 years. So we have made the application there. I know the Deputy Mayor, I believe you had brought that up to us initially. So that has been done, and we'll wait and see what happens with the review of that through CMHC. And then two other items. A big item here is the county official plan was finally approved by the province with modifications. So we did go through those modifications that the province made. They were relatively minor in nature, I would say, in terms of the totality of the plan. However, it did result in us having to go back to Lucan's official plan and to do some additional modifications there. And most of that was just specific to the verbiage that we have included. One thing of note was, for whatever reason, the province did not view tiny homes as additional residential units based on their Bill 23 requirements. So what we've had to do in the case of Lucan's official plan as well is go back and make that modification to remove the verbiage for tiny home outside of the ARU process. And they are just reviewing those as temporary housing units. So we can still potentially approve tiny homes, but they have been moved to the garden suite temporary housing provisions that are in both the official plan as well as the PPS. So just something to note. So yep, the county official plan is in force and effect now, which now means my last update that the Lucan official plan will be proceeding to county council for review. So like I had said, we had gone through and did the modifications to that document based on the comments that we did receive from the province. Most of those modifications that were made were mostly just tweaking words here and there. And then I would note that based on the format of Lucan's official plan, we did add the opportunity for additional residential units in the agricultural areas. That was intended through council. It was just something that was missed originally based on the formatting of our bylaw that came forward. So that is all in there. And just so council is aware in the public, that will be proceeding to county council in August. So you will get first reading there in August of the Lucan official plan. And I would expect that a decision would be coming forward in September. And then we'll wait to see what happens after that. So that's all I have today. If anyone has any questions, I can certainly answer them.
Okay, thank you for that update, Dan. Any questions of Dan at this time? Deputy Mayor Mander.
Is it appealable? The
So through the chair to Councillor Manders, as far as we're aware, based on the director's opinion and as well as my opinion, it is subject to potential appeal. However, we are getting a legal opinion on that as well.
Very good. Because again, I'm looking forward to this obviously getting adopted. Again, as you can see in our, we have got no 2-story homes that can be built. There's obviously one site that's not cost prohibitive, it appears, for a municipality. And then basically, unless you can correct me, there's the one on Kent Street's 1 floors. These are condos, but there's no place to build a 2-story house in Lucan Biddulph. So, oh, is that going to be 2-story? Yeah, sorry, then I'll correct that. But all in Lucan, the township of Lucan, there's no place to build a 2-story house in this area.
In the village of Lucan.
Village of Lucan, then yes, in the village of Lucan, yes. So, which again is concerning.
Yes, so through the chair to the deputy mayor. So there, we do have the old Clover site is approved for single family homes, and that includes 2 stories. Obviously, there's cost prohibitions in that particular case, which we were likely referring to. But we do have draft plan approved subdivisions right now. For instance, the Timber Ridge subdivision. They're working through the more detailed engineering designs in that particular case. And once the official plan comes into force and effect, it's likely that we'll be looking at additional draft plan applications for subdivisions. So yeah, you're very much correct.
Any other questions for Dan at this time? Okay, thanks for that. On to Public Works, Jeff.
Good morning, Madam Mayor. I have a couple of reports and some verbal updates for council. My first report is the report on the memo that BM Ross has put forward on the Chestnut pumping station. As council is aware that we are and currently BM Ross is designing an expansion for the wastewater treatment plant. And part of that expansion is we want to make sure that the Chestnut pumping station is updated and can meet that expansion. The current expansion, what we're looking at the wastewater treatment plant is a 50% expansion in stage 1 and another 50% expansion, but another train that could be added as a stage 2 when growth promotes that expansion. As part of that, we do want to make sure the Chestnut pumping station is available and can make sure it can move the material to the plant. In January, BM Ross put forward a memo, and they basically brought forward 8 possible alternatives for upgrading the Chestnut station. In review with staff and Aqua, there was some comments and some we wanted to look at some more technical information. And as part of that review, BM Ross brought forward a second memo in July, and that they outlined 2 alternatives for us to look at for the update at the Chestnut station. So just to kind of, obviously there's a lot of technical information in the memos, but I'll try and consolidate it. Basically what we're looking at for the update. Currently, there is 2 force mains that leave Chestnut. There is a 200 millimeter that goes directly to the wastewater treatment plant. And this is mainly is fed by the duty pumps, which duty means the everyday pumps that we use to get material to the plant. There is a second force main, and it's a 300 millimeter, and it goes to lagoons. And this is in place so that during our very high flows, or what we call peak flows, there's a pump that can turn on, and we actually can use the lagoons as our emergency backup storage. When conditions permit, we then take the material back out of the lagoons and take it over to the plant. As part of the expansion, we were talking about using one of the cells as sludge storage. And that way there'd be considerable savings using infrastructure we already have in place as a storage rather than building concrete holding tanks. And currently, though, we do not have a sludge force main to the lagoons. So in this update, or in this review, in the 2 alternatives, the first one is called Alternative 5. And the idea here is to parallel the existing 200 millimeter force main with an additional 250 force main. This would be a duty fed system, meaning that everyday flows would go through this, very similar to the 200 main we have in place. In doing that, we would also install a new sludge force main from the plant over to the lagoon, and we would keep the existing 300 millimeter force main in place for the peak flows to the lagoon. There would be 2 new 30 horsepower duty pumps and 2 new 75 peak flow pumps. Part of the replacement of the pumps and I think it was in the memo, I didn't put it in the report, is once our pumping station, we have known that we've known, council has been aware, and we have been knowing that there's been upgrades coming for the Chestnut Station for probably about 8 years. We knew this was coming. So, and once you open the door for those updates, the electrical requirements to update everything falls into place. So when we looked at this, the Chestnut Station is going to get new pumps no matter what, just because of the age and the need for upgrades based on the the electrical requirements. So I don't want to get too lost in how many pumps and why are we getting new pumps. We will get new pumps. That has to be part of the update. The benefits of alternative 5 is basically we get to maximize peak flows. We will be able to sync our pumping station to our wastewater treatment plant, and we can pump that peak flows to the plant with what the plant can accept. And basically all it means is instead of using our backup to the lagoons more, we can put more into the plant during peak flows. Alternative 5 is a little bit more interesting, and this is the one staff and Aqua and we all wanted more review on. We wanted to take the existing 300-meter overflow or peak flow and convert it to the duty force main, which means it's an increase of size. And to do this, we would extend it to the lagoons, meaning that we would add on to it and take it to the lagoons, or take it to the wastewater treatment plant, because it already goes over to the lagoons. Then we would take the 200-millimeter existing force main and basically cut it in two, and we would use the first half to use it as a peak flow to the lagoons, and we would use the other half as the sludge force main that would bring the sludge back to the lagoons. Basically what we're doing here is we're not installing so much force main in the ground. We would need to put slightly bigger pumps in. We would need two brand new 45 horsepower duty pumps, and the peak flow pumps would stay the same. We would need two brand new 75 horsepower peak flow pumps here. The advantage of this alternative really is capital cost savings. We really are not putting as much force main in the ground. So when we look at and try and compare the two alternatives, it's certainly alternative 5s, and I say that in my report, there is more flexibility by having two force main, two duty mains that are going to the plant. It certainly would be an added flexibility to running the system. However, I am recommending to council that alternative 8 be the one we look at, and mainly because the engineering of alternative 5 is to take it to the limit, and by doing that, our duty force mains are being met through the expansion of the plant. So really what we're doing is going beyond a secondary engineering step than we actually need for the expansion of the plant and hopefully meet the future capacity. So in that, when we review that, I think the capital costs of saving $400,000 plus the carrying costs of the expansion, because let's be realistic, it's going to take a while for the plant to be paid off or for this expansion to be paid off. So when you start looking at that, that's a considerable capital outlay over a long period of time for something that, we may never end up using that capacity, because there could be other things that come up in the next 20 to 30 years. And that peak flows may never be needed at the Chestnut Station. Both of these alternatives will be financed very similar to what the expansion is. We're going to be using development charges to pay for the majority, but there will be a portion of it paid through the capital levy fund. Basically, that's it. I know there was a lot of technical information in the memos. I tried to keep it very simple in some of the mapping in the report, so I would open it back up to council for comments.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Jeff. You took the words right out of my mouth about it being very technical. So probably a good report to do in the morning as opposed to an evening meeting. So appreciate that, and do appreciate you walking us through it as you have. Questions or comments, clarifications from council on this report? Councillor Regan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, if I may. So Jeff, so alternative 8 limits our flexibility in the future. And I'm just wondering, and of course, and that's exactly what I was going to ask about, like new technologies, because I'd been in part of some of those meetings and we had talked about what might be there in 20 years that, somebody somewhere is probably, can invent something next week sort of thing. But I'm just wondering if that isn't the case. So how would that alternative 8 limit our ability to expand, say, 15, 20 years from now? Does it lock us in? And again, forgetting that there may or may not be new technologies where we can treat sewage a little bit differently.
Yeah, through the mayor. I don't think either, well, and I know either one of these alternatives, they do not lock us in so much. The flexibility is more in having 2 force mains. If we wanted to shut one down, we always have a second one that we can get material to the plant. It's more flexibility in the operation rather than the planning or the outlook for 30 years down the road. So yeah, it really is more about operational flexibility at the plant, having two force main, 2 duty force mains.
All right. Okay. No, I understand better. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you. Thanks, Jeff.
Deputy Mayor Manders.
Just that Chestnut pumping station, is that though where eventually, when there's further growth years to come on Sainsbury, is that where that'll come to, that pumping station? Or no?
Yeah, and through the mayor, we're still working on the modeling studies, obviously, that's one of their goals, to get that modeling study done, to find out exactly where everything's going to go. But yeah, so the Timber Ridge proposal, and I'm just making sure I get all my words right. Timber Ridge does come down the first phase of it, maybe the second phase will use Kent Street. So there is a portion of it that does come down and go into the Chestnut pumping station. Currently, I believe, and it's in one of the memos, like we're probably over 90% of all sewage flow in the town of Lucan right now goes through the Chestnut pumping station. There is other land coming that we've looked at to the west that is currently in being brought in that could use a different pumping station, could use a different route.
Right.
So some of that land may not use the Chestnut station, but generally the Chestnut pumping station for the foreseeable future will handle the majority of the sanitary needs of Lucan.
And then do you not, but then, I don't understand it as well, obviously, as yourself, but is that not a concern where you maybe would want the alternative you said that you liked with the, potential peak flows, or no? Like, I know it's $400,000 more, but you look at, if we look at the study and everything we did, I mean, where we're future build the next 15, 20 years is, and then now that we're seem like coming into town, the next gradual step's going to be going outside. So is that, I mean, the 400,000, like, it's a huge project. I mean, I look at the $400,000, if that's something, it's a lot of money, but in the scheme of long-term and percentage of expense, I don't know.
Yeah, and through the mayor. So, and I think that's where it comes into when we talk about peak flows. That's the high flows during a heavy rain event. And right now we take advantage of the lagoons. That's that peak flow that goes in the lagoons. What we would be maximizing the pumping station to is really what we're going to do is take away that backup to the lagoons. So we always still have the backup to the lagoons. So that peak flow, what we're saying is if we want to lessen our dependence on the lagoon, we're just going to put more material into the plant during peak flows. Has nothing to do with duty flows. So we're always going to maximize the plant for whether it's future growth and what we're actually planning to build the plant to for growth. The force main, both alternatives will meet that. So we're not spending the money for growth. We would be spending the money to lessen our dependency on basically lagoons. And I'm trying to kind of keep it very simple. But that's where it's coming down to. And that's why I consider the savings of the 400,000. We still will have the lagoons. It's a wonderful asset that the town has. And if we didn't have that, I'm not sure alternative 8 would even be, we would be talking about it. But because we've got the lagoons and because we already have a force main already going there, yeah, it's we can look at it.
Thank you for that. Jeff, any other questions? Just Councillor Hodgins.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Through you to Jeff, I just wanted to ask the timing for this upgrade of this project. Does this happen with the expansion of the wastewater treatment plant, or is it independent? What's the timing of this upgrade?
Yeah, and through the mayor, it is going to be tied with the expansion of the plant. We're going to do it. We're corresponding to both of them to be done at the same time, so that basically we can address this issue, so that the pumping station and the plant are done and are working together. And it is staged out. They are going to stage them stage 1 and stage 2. But no, we are planning that when council decides, and that's a decision for council when they want to move forward with the expansion, they'll both be done at the same time.
And just one more question, if I may. In the report, it mentions that this is to be financed with development charges. So has this upgrade in this project, was that included with our recent development charge update, or is the capital cost within the treatment plant expansion project, or where does that sit?
Yeah, and through the mayor. So it was always the goal with BM Ross to make sure the update of the Chestnut Station was done with the expansion, so that when we did look at the new development charges, the costs that BM Ross brought forward were included the Chestnut Station update. So yes, so the answer is yes, it is in the DCs.
Okay, thanks, Jeff.
Okay, thank you for that. Just further to that, Jeff, because you mentioned that, so this upgrade will be a combination of development charges and from the capital levy that some existing users will have to pay for some of it. Do you know the percentage breakdown of what that is? And if you don't, I'm sorry, I should have probably prepped you for that. If you could just get it to us, just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I do have that information, but I would rather that I got it to council so that we have the exact figures. And BM Ross, those are figures BM Ross have looked at based on the development charges, because we want to make sure when we updated that, we had to have the right figures. So that'll come out of that information I've got through the development charges, so I can bring that forward.
And then just kind of back to the timing question. So understanding just from what Councillor Hodgins asked you, the idea is to go ahead with the expansion and this project at the same time. In the event that council decides that they might pull back on the expansion for whatever reason, and I'm just trying to, does this have like, are we under the gun from a timing perspective to get this expansion done?
So that's a really good, that's a really good question. So I can say kind of a two-part to that question, if you don't mind, Madam Mayor. The first part is the Chestnut Station's actually working well with what we've got there. This is really an update. Yeah, there's some update on the electrical and there's some updates on the generating system that we've always known we've got coming, but there is no pressure right now to update the force mains or the pumps that we have there. What's working there is working there right now without the expansion moving forward. So Chestnut shouldn't drive, there shouldn't be any pressure there. Having said that, we know there's going to be an update. We know that in the short term, there'll be an update. That's not, and short term, when I'm talking about this, is years, not months or that sort of thing. So no. So your first part of the question is no, this is not driving any timeline with the expansion. Having said that, I just want to make sure that there's a reminder that there is a couple of items at the plant that if we do, depending on when council wants to discuss going to tender, there is a couple of items that we would have to address depending on what council's comfortable with the timeline. So I don't want to say, no, there's no pressure, but the pressure is more of a couple of items considering, and I think we've talked about this, it's the headworks building. And we've talked about that it needs updating and it'll drive some of our decisions on when to pull the trigger to go to tender.
Okay, thank you for that. One last call for questions, comments. Okay, so with that, the recommended motion in front of us is that report PW-12-2023 be received for information, and further that the council direct staff to move forward with the alternative 8 as put forward in the BM Ross memo dated July 20th, 2023. A mover and a seconder for this, please. Councillor Hodgins and Deputy Mayor Manders, all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Okay, did you want to continue on, Jeff?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, my second report is an update report, and this has to do with the site alteration bylaw. We've had a couple, we've had an open meeting with the public since we last talked about this. So I just want to bring some stuff back to council on it. So we did have a public meeting. It was on March the 30th. And there was a number of stakeholders that did come in and provide comment. The conservation authorities were here, as well as Arnie Marsman, our CBO, provided comments on Bill 23 in relation to development and site alterations. And like I said, there was a large a group of property owners, and they represented mainly more of the agricultural community, and they did provide comment that centered on their rural properties. So the Conservation Authority, they did make it very clear they support this bylaw, but I must say that there has been no more additional information brought forward since the public meeting. Arnie at the meeting did explain and introduce some concerns when Bill 23 was brought in around small site plan developments that could potentially alter their site without coming back to the township for approval. Since that time, and I think Arnie touched on it, the building department has updated the building bylaw. And with this update, it's going to kind of close up those loopholes for the small development. And so that they will not be able to alter their site without some site plan control in place. And just touch on the public meeting, a number of the agriculture community, we're here, and I think overall, and it was presented through a number of comments that they were opposed to having a site alteration bylaw in place. They expressed various comments and indicated, and I quote, the farmers don't want this as brought in. As part of that public meeting, we did touch on, and I did follow up with, because the province brought in soil regulations, excessive soil regulations. I did follow up with some experts in that field. And basically, just to kind of give council an update, these regulations, and again, this is very, as regulations go, there's a number of factors, but basically to keep it a little bit more related to us. There's two parts to the regulation. One is sheer volume. If you're moving a large amount of material, you got to register where you're dumping it with the province. When we looked at those volumes are massive. We would not be dealing with that type of volume in this municipality. So I think that one can easily be crossed off the list of having any sort of reflection at this point or with the us producing a site alteration bylaw. The second part of it is though, and then one of the things that the soil regulations wanted to address was the moving of contaminated soil. And what this really comes down to is if there's a history of on a site that could indicate there's contaminated soil, you have to register. And this could come down to an old factory site or fuel station. The province is now asking you register to move that material. And it's not saying that it has to be contaminated. They're just saying they want something to register that you've looked in to determine whether it is contaminated. So I think that is interesting, because that was one of the things that we talked about with the site alteration was we didn't want contaminated soil coming into the municipality. Having said that, I think one of the wild cards, or one of the things I'm not sure is how that's policed. And there is some concern from my department is, and I get this with when we talk about fuel problems, accidents and stuff. I get called by the Ministry of Environment to go out and investigate spills and that sort of thing, which concerns me because it's really a responsibility of the Ministry of Environment to follow up with some of the stuff. So I don't want to take on a responsibility that the provincial government, or not the provincial government, provincial ministry is really trying to put in force with their regulations. So I do have some concern with getting in the middle of that. I would say too, I do, and again, we see this with bylaw, and I'm sure Arnie will talk about this as we get, is there seems to be a lot of times where municipalities, they want the municipality to get in to disputes between neighbors. Neighbors start having a disagreement, and if we can find anything to bring the municipality in, and I could see this happening. I could see this becoming a dispute. Yet, I want to see, what the municipality is saying about site alterations and that sort of thing. So I do have a little bit of concern about becoming in the middle of a neighbor versus neighbor dispute. Having said that, council is consideration, and maybe that's something council would like us to be, more aware of what's going on out there. So having said all that, I am recommending that council not proceed with a site alteration bylaw at this time. I really think that with Arnie's change in the building, with the regulations of contaminated soil a little stronger in the province, we really are only bringing this forward for our rural residents. And the comments that we got back from them was that they weren't interested whatsoever with this site alteration bylaw. I did receive one comment from a rural resident thinking it was a positive thing. So I council is aware that we did get a positive comment on this site alteration. So I don't want to make sure I don't lose that too. And before I go back to council, the only thing I would say is that this doesn't put it to bed. This is an open issue that can be revisited at any time. So just because we don't move forward with a bylaw right away, it can be we can bring the process back at any time council feels. And I think that's important to say too. Because as we gather more information or things do come forward, we could always revisit this.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeff. Comments, questions from council. Deputy Mayor Manders.
Yeah, no, I agree with Jeff's recommendation. I do think between all the constituents, Lucan Biddulph, I mean, it wasn't a case of maybe not wanting it, but there was certainly no reasonings given to needing it. I would look at it more that way as opposed to the other way, but and also the governing bodies. Again, I was looking for examples of, here's an example of why we need this in this situation at this, location. And if we would have had this, it would have helped our community, and there was none of that. So again, between governing bodies and no one within our community giving reasons why we need it, it was an all right exercise, but I agree with the recommendation.
Any other comments or questions for Jeff? Okay, I would just echo what the deputy mayor said. This has been, it's been a long process. But I would say, I think it's been as much as I know it's put a lot on your plate, Jeff. And, it wasn't something that was necessarily on your radar before it was brought up. And you've learned a lot. I think we've all learned a lot about site altering, what it means, have a better understanding of that. So certainly I appreciate the work in the background that you have done. And I would say that this was a very good exercise for not only council, but our residents to go through. It is not often that we get the sort of public engagement that we have had. And I would commend the agricultural community for getting together and for presenting in the way that they did at the public meeting. That being said, I would agree with the deputy mayor. It wasn't so much, in my mind, it's not so much what they don't want, it's why would we do this? We don't seem to have an issue. Our agricultural community seems to be acting responsibly. We've never, to our knowledge, ever had complaints with how sites have been altered. As I say, I think it's been a great exercise. We've learned a lot, and putting a bylaw in place at this stage to deter what? Because right now it seems that our community seems to be acting responsibly and with no ill effect. And I do appreciate that, now that we've learned so much, it is always something that can be revisited should the environment change or we be presented with information in the years to come. So thank you very much for that. With that, I would ask if there's no other comments, then I would ask for a mover and a seconder for the motion in front of us that report PW-13-2023 be received for information, and further that council direct staff to abandon any work on a site alteration bylaw at this time. A mover and a seconder, please. Deputy Mayor Manders and Councillor Regan, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much. Did you have anything verbal, Jeff?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I do have one item I did want to bring up with council, and I know it's a lot of stuff all at once, but and this has to do with the Main Street sidewalk extension. I guess maybe before I move on, will give an update because it's all connected. We are, as everyone knows, there is Main Street construction going on. There was a new water main installed from Chestnut out to the commercial center. This was done on guidance from the municipality, but it was a project that was triggered by the commercial development. In doing that, they're just finishing up. The water main has been installed, and we will be getting some new curb, and the road will be patched up very shortly. As part of that commercial project, hydro is now in and replacing the poles on Main Street, which they are, we have to upgrade the poles. We have to get 3-phase power and more power to this side of town. So that's basically the work that's going on down Chestnut and along Main Street. So as part of that, we did talk about, and this goes back to a June meeting, on the June 6th meeting, we talked about the Main Street sidewalk extension. And at that time, I brought forward a report and council approved a design to get a combination, and it was proposed, there was three points with the sidewalk extension. The first one is across the road from us. There is a curb, stormwater already in place, but there's no sidewalk on the and we'll call it the west side of Main Street. So that would be the first thing, that sidewalk could be extended very easily out to where the curb ends along Main Street. And then the second point would be to fill in and expand the ditch, but put a more of a trail system that could connect up with the commercial center, and then provide the ability for people to walk or bike directly to the commercial center. And then the third aspect of the design was street lighting, so that we would have a safe walkway from the edge of town, or from the edge of the arena out to the commercial center. So I just last week got that design, and we're still working through a couple of things with the street lighting, and it's just kind of a draft design. One of the updates I wanted to talk about at council today was the extension of the concrete sidewalk portion. It's really not, it really doesn't account for a lot of engineering. We're not going to change anything. All we're going to do is extend the sidewalk from basically the arena where it ends to where we already have full urban cross section in road. It's just an extension of the concrete sidewalk. I am going to, and again, the plan was, and this is out of the first report from the June report, was bringing back a report to council on how to go forward with the design. But part of that, and again, I'll still do that. But what I would bring forward council today is, and I'm just looking for maybe some input, is if we could move forward with a concrete portion of the sidewalk, only the concrete portion of the sidewalk, just because it really doesn't change the engineering. There's really no grades other than installing the concrete sidewalk. And the reason why I bring that forward today is with the current contractor out there already installing a lot of the concrete work, there's an opportunity for a quote that may be it may be beneficial to get a quote from that contractor. He's already on site. He's already available to do that work. So I'm going to go forward. The project, if we did install the concrete sidewalk, will be under the $50,000 required to go to tender. I'm still required to bring forward 3 quotes for council. I would like to move forward with that. And I would like to get that information to council. I don't think council has to make a decision today on whether to say, go, yeah, Jeff, move forward with that. But I just wanted council aware there's something going on in the background, and that I will be bringing more information sooner than later, if we can take advantage financially of something out there. Yeah, I think that's just the update I kind of wanted council to hear. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
All right, thank you, Jeff. Any comments from council? Deputy Mayor Manders.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'd like to see it proceed to right through to quotation, and now that you told, we won't be surprised, but I'd like to see what that looks like, and again with the high density on this side of the road, and obviously the arena being done and the volume of people probably walking to the complex. I certainly don't want to be the one to hold you up from that sidewalk being looked at right now and maybe expedited. That's for sure. So.
Any other comments or questions? Yeah, I think that the deputy mayor's probably summed up what we're all thinking. I think you've done a great explanation, or a good job at explaining to us why we should be. And I would agree. I don't want to be the one to hold up on this one.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Other than that, that's the only major update I had.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions for Jeff? Well, okay. Okay, Parks and Rec, Paul.
Thank you to you, Madam Mayor.
Great. Actually, before you do that, we'll just, we'll just take a 2-minute break if you don't mind. Sorry, Paul. If we just take a 2-minute break, accommodation or, refreshment break. That's right. Okay. Okay, thank you for accommodating that refreshment break. So now, Paul, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. The first report in front of council is regarding capital purchases for the new fitness space, the Lucan Biddulph Community Memorial Center. The purpose of this report is to gain council's approval to go ahead with capital purchases to outfit the space in time for the fall season. These purchases were not originally identified in the capital budget discussions. And we had seeked out alternative funding sources, but at this time, there isn't any alternate funding sources to meet the deadline of opening the fitness center. So using the expertise of the fitness manager, we've developed a strategy to outfit the fitness space with the minimal amount of equipment to have a successful fitness space. And then we can potentially, as other sources open up again, look at expanding in the future through capital budget discussions and to align with funding availabilities. Through the fitness manager's industry knowledge, we were able to look at 3 quotes for equipment. And the first one, Fitness Avenue, was around $37,000. Bells of Steel was $48,000, and Fitness Factory was around $53,000. All these are not including HST. And in his original RFP submission, the fitness manager did tell us to expect $50,000 to $70,000 for capital purchases to outfit the space. The fitness manager has recommended that we would accept the quote for $37,152.43 from Fitness Avenue, as well as them being the most cost effective. Through his experience, they have been a reliable and good company to work with. For any IT purchases, the county IT would prefer that is purchased through the county for security reasons, as it will be on our network. And they've recommended setting up a budget for $3,000 related to those items. And then the fitness manager has recommended matted flooring to reduce noise, protect the floor underneath the equipment, and to ensure safety, as well as to open up further fitness opportunities that require ground space. And this has been quoted at $3,600 plus HST. And then for a key card access system, it is recommending $1,500 for the card system. So based upon this, staff's recommending allocating a $50,000 in the Parks and Recreation Reserve to cover the anticipated costs, plus some incidentals. This reserve can be replenished through the revenue sharing agreement after operating costs are covered. And currently the Parks and Recreation budget the reserve sits at approximately $338,000 after accounting for anticipated 2023 budget transfers.
Okay, thank you for that. Paul, questions from council on this recommendation? Councillor Reagan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If I may, Paul, I'm just wondering, you mentioned that there's the revenue cost sharing. Is there any projection about what kind of revenue we'd expect from this
At this
to
moment,
offset the costs of the equipment?
sorry,
No. Go ahead.
through you, Madam Mayor. At this time, we don't really know, because that would be based on the uptake from the residents to participate in the gym. So at this time, we're unaware of that.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
I think the revenue sharing agreement, though, was spelt out in the agreement that we ended up with the
Yes.
fitness manager, right? So percentages and all that. Any other questions or concerns? Councillor Hodgins.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Just 2 questions, if I may. The first question, is this new equipment or is this used equipment?
It's all new equipment.
Did you hear that, Councillor Hodgins? It's new equipment.
Oh, did he freeze?
He's frozen. Oh, there he goes. Now he's unfrozen. Did you hear that, Councillor Hodgins? It's new equipment.
It's new equipment. Okay. No, I didn't hear it the first time. My internet's kind of in and out. And then my second question is just generally, like, what is the equipment? Is it cardio equipment? Is it strength training equipment or machines, or more like free weights?
It's a combination of all those items to ensure a full fitness experience.
Great, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? I guess this may be a question for Catherine, given that it's coming from reserves, we don't need a change to like a change to budget motion or anything like that.
No, we can just go off the recommendation here and use that for going forward.
Okay, great, thanks. With that, if there's no other discussion on that, we do have the motion in front of us that the report be received for information and that council authorize staff to proceed with the recommended capital purchase to outfit the new fitness space at the Lucan Biddulph Community Memorial Center. A mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Regan and Councillor Hodgins, all in favor? And that's carried. Okay, the next one.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. The next report in front of council is in regard to execution of the agreements for the concession space and the fitness services provided to the Township of Lucan Biddulph. Tommy Cadwell was a successful proponent for the RFP for operations of the new fitness space at the Lucan Biddulph Community Memorial Center. And in his proposal outlined the capital investments and business cases to provide Lucan Biddulph with a solution to provide residents with access to well-rounded fitness programming at an affordable rate. The attached agreement represents the business case that was presented to the selection committee as in his proposal. Lot Chancellor agreement is also based upon the business case that they had presented to the selection committee inside the Lucan Biddulph Community Memorial Center. And both agreements were established to provide the community with the ideal service level while considering successful achievement for the township and the proponents to meet the service needs. Each agreement was circulated to the municipal solicitor to ensure the best interest of the township is upheld and covered under the agreements. And these agreements were drafted with consideration of success for the applicants while meeting the service deliverables to the township. It is staff's belief these agreements are a good first step to establish a positive success for the applicants and the township. And both the agreements, however, are set with a one-year review to ensure financial interest of the township is being met while providing desired service levels for the community, and we are covering our costs.
Okay, questions for Paul on what's in front of us? Deputy Mayor Manders.
I guess sure, these two spaces that are going to be leased from us, there's no any staff time or requirements within inside of these facilities.
There'll be minimal janitorial costs like deep cleaning. They will be responsible for their day-to-day cleaning, but probably once a week, there'll be a staff going in and doing a deep clean.
So their expectations won't be to do a deep clean. Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Just on the canteen one, now I guess maybe a deep clean of the canteen, given that it's food prep and everything, I guess, what does that mean?
So the expectation of them would be for them to keep all their equipment and clean, like the degreasing and all those things would be their responsibility. But anything like coming in once in a while and mopping the floor maybe for them, or just making sure it's in good condition because it is our space still and we have all the equipment for that.
Okay, I'm not, anyways, I guess I question whether why we would have to be responsible for that. I understand it gives us an opportunity to make sure that the space is being maintained the way it should be, but especially, I guess I wonder why our staff would be responsible for cleaning the floor of a food prep area myself, but.
To you, Madam Mayor, they would be expected to uphold it to a certain standard on their day-to-day stuff. It's just once in a while, we should go through and just ensure that it is. It's mostly the fitness space that we'll be having the floor machine go through, for instance.
Okay. I guess, anyways, I question the once in a while. When we started the discussion, you said once a week. So I would probably like a better understanding, and you don't have to provide it today, but exactly what it is, what is the commitment that we're making, because that is a cost to us. And that is time that you're going to have to manage into the schedule. So I do have a couple of questions, but Councillor Regan, did you have an? Okay. Okay. So just if we can keep an eye on that, because that just sits here. You did mention that our costs are being covered by the rental. I guess from the fitness standpoint, we'll see how that all plays out, because there is the cost sharing. But again, back to the municipality, back to the canteen space. It's a very nominal rental fee that we are collecting. And much like, the ice in the summer, if we can kind of keep track of what our costs are to make sure that nominal fee is covering now the staff time that's going in there, and that sort of thing. I understand utilities, we can't divide them out, but I do think we have to keep an eye on that. And then in reading the agreement, and I read it a few times, and so forgive me if I've missed it, but the equipment is our equipment. And there's part of the agreement that speaks about, that the tenant's responsible for the ongoing cleaning and maintenance of the concession space. Is it spelled out if something goes wrong with a piece of equipment, who's responsible for fixing it? So for example, something happens to the fryer. Have we spelt out that we are responsible for fixing our own equipment, or is the tenant responsible for that?
I'm just looking that part up right now, Madam Mayor. I apologize. The equipment that is provided, however, is just because we already have it. They're providing their own additional equipment to operate their services. I'll have to find the part in the agreement, whether it's spelled out specifically if it's because of their use that the equipment's damaged. I'm sure we can sit down and negotiate that with them. I would expect they would understand if it's due to their use. If it's simply due to the equipment no longer working because of age, it would be up to them to add new equipment to the space. And in terms of utilities, I have spoken with some of our local contractors, and we're looking into providing a sub meter onto the gas line, because that's going to be the largest utility, obviously. And then even with KL's coming to look and to see where we can install possibly hydro analysis on the, it just depends if it's all off the same panel or if it's individual circuits off a panel shared, just so we can keep track of that as well.
Okay, I would, I guess I would be more comfortable in getting a better understanding of who's responsible for the equipment. Because I don't see that spelt out, and maybe it was spelt out when we awarded the RFP to them. I don't know.
I will have to get back to you on that, Madam Mayor, but I would recommend if we authorize this agreement, it could also be added in as an amendment with signatures from both parties.
Okay. Good with that. Any other questions? Oh, Councillor Regan, you had some questions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, if I may. So the management services agreement, Madam Mayor, just to point out, as I was reading, I think there was one section at the bottom that spoke to actual ownership, I think. 11.11 talked about that the owner owns the equipment.
That's in the fitness one.
Is that the fitness one? Okay, I'm just sorry. Oh, sorry, my mistake, right? Okay, so I guess if I just go back to my question then, sorry. So the people who are the folks that are running the concession and the fitness center, they're totally aware of the standard that they have to keep the building. My concern too is about staff time and about us going in with it weekly, occasionally, hourly, I don't know. So I'm just wondering, is that actually spelled out as well? Is that very clear that, this is where their responsibility lies and where our responsibility is going to lie? And I was concerned about that too. It's just that I don't know if we want staff spending hours cleaning equipment and those sorts of things, any kind of equipment, because there has, again, what is the responsibility of the people who are leasing these spaces as opposed to what our responsibility is? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Through you, Madam Mayor. To address council's concerns, our staff time will be very minimal. It's spoken to in the agreements, what our expectations of and what they're supposed to meet with myself or one of the other managers of the facility to ensure that it's met to our standards. When it comes to building maintenance, you know, it could be there's a hole in the drywall or something like that. We have to be able to get in there to do building maintenance to ensure our facilities upkept. So it could be different time spent in there depending on the task.
Are you comfortable with that, Councillor Regan?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. For now, I'm good. Thank you. Thank you, Paul.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, then we do have a recommended motion in front of you. I guess for my level of comfort, should there be something added in about a possible amendment, or would you be bringing the amendment back? Or could we?
Through you, Madam Mayor, you could just add in that council approves execution of the agreements based on discussions and amendments discussed at today's
Possible amendments.
Yep. Are subject to further amendments as discussed at today's meeting.
Oh, that's good. That's good. That's very clerky. That's very good. Subject to further amendments based on discussion. Okay. Okay, so with that in mind, the recommended motion is that we receive that report and that council approve the execution of the agreement subject to further amendments based on the discussion at today's council meeting presented for the fitness and concession space operations inside the Lucan Biddulph Community Memorial Center. A mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Regan and Councillor Hodgins, all in favor? And that's carried. Okay, next one, Paul.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. The next report in front of council is meant to be received as information. And the purpose of this report is to follow up on some comments Deputy Mayor Dave Manders had at the previous council meeting, inquiring about the plans to move forward to ensure the success of the soccer fields. Staff has met with GHN and BM Ross and the seed provider in the early summer to ensure the successful development plan from the summer months into the next spring to ensure that our soccer fields are developed successfully. With the driest May on record, we did have to implement some extra watering practices along with updating fertilization schedules to fight against the uncommon season that we faced. Fertilization schedules along with periodic mowing no shorter than 4 inches will remain consistent until completion of the project to maintain a successful turf grass. We don't want to cut it too short and kill off what we've got. And upon recommendation of the seed provider, a top dressing and overseeding will happen in late August, early September, as this is the most ideal time of the year for that to happen. And then some washouts did occur over the winter that require fixing, and some of the catch basins will be cleaned out and dug around to ensure proper water route functions as they should. Sod's going to be placed around the catch basins to avoid further buildup, contributing to further washouts. As we get the grass around them back in proper growth. And then the light standards for the premier field will be installed in the fall, as there was a delay with the designed heads for the light standards on their delivery. Although there was a slight overage to the project due to the watering during the dry spring months, there will be no other impacts to the budget at this time.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Any comment on this report? Deputy Mayor Manders.
Yeah, my concern was still, I did a site visit there and stood on each of the fields, and I'm not, there's obviously one field in question. I'm not sure exactly how you number them, but it's pretty easy to see which field I'm talking about that definitely needs work or potentially plowed under, in time, depending on the outcome of top dressing and seeding and weed killing. But, I would, underneath discussion, it would have been nice to see. Good news is we haven't paid our bill yet because our expectations haven't been met, and that's, I guess what I'm again, the washouts and then the top dressing and the things that need, like I'm just thinking of when, you know, BM Ross, we hire them with an expectation to certainly, I hope, not walk in the field and stand there with and see what I saw. I mean, I hope that's not what we passed. And again, so my question is not when we're going to play, the other fields look good. It's just, you know, when BM Ross went out and assisted us for the expectations of the field, certainly that one field is not, you know, what we paid for. So is our, you know, again, getting to that point, which is to not really fine, but either if our staff needs to get there now, and unfortunately, you know, which I didn't realize, you know, basically if you're, you know, what you're telling me then is all 4 fields could have been like that one field, because it's easy to blame weather or nutrients. So I'm really concerned to learn from this, because what we could have done then was spent, you know, $1 million, whatever it was, and had no soccer fields. Because if we're allowed to not have one soccer field, then what we're saying is we could have had no soccer fields. Really, I mean, that's, so again, holding BM Ross and I think it's GHN, or, you know, accountable or not, or learning from this. Because again, my concern is if our staff or our ratepayers are about to pay for this portion and clean this up, then it really worked. Thank goodness the other fields came on, because again, we could have just we could have no soccer fields today. So again, looking back at what we asked for, have we gotten that on that complex, and where does that sit?
Yes, there's current negotiations. We've asked BM Ross to go back with GHN and negotiate what they feel that's still outstanding, as well as we do still have holdbacks and payments left on that field as well. So the project isn't complete. So there is still holdbacks.
Because good, no, very good. And again, because obviously I assume you're going to come to a point in time where if there's pushback from the contractor that we're going to use those funds and see where that falls on the holdbacks, but we don't want to hold up, you know, again, addressing the washouts and addressing the catch basins and addressing obviously the field in question. So, you know, whether we proceed and use those funds, or they proceed and they eat the funds. But, you know, and again, I guess what date do you start using the funds? To what date do they start using their own funds?
That one I'll have to come back to council with, as the negotiations are still going on.
Yeah.
But there's obviously, as the seed provider did mention to us, timing is everything,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
So-
that's 100%.
that's-
That's what I mean. We can't say, oh, darn, I wish we would have proceeded with our money on the holdback and decided how that was going to look after, or are they going to proceed to get fully paid out? And again, we can learn from this too, and hopefully protect ourselves, or a cost sharing, or what, you know, anything. But it's you know, again, this report was okay. It wasn't still exactly. I think you understand now my true question, I hope.
Yep.
Further comment or question from council? So just, I guess, further, Paul, you're saying that there's negotiation and discussion going on between BM Ross and GHN. So in the report, you've laid out what needs to happen. So is the negotiation is who's going to do it?
Yes.
Okay. Because at this point, we still don't know who's going to do it. Okay, so I guess there'll be more to come on that. Okay, with that, this is just a report to be received for information. So I would ask for a mover and a seconder on this one, please. Deputy Mayor Manders and Councillor Regan, all in favor, and that's carried. Did you have anything verbal, Paul?
Nothing further, Madam Mayor.
Thank you for that. Anything from economic development? No. Councillor comments? Councillor Regan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If I may, and I may ask for comments from Jeff a little bit later, if I can. My concern my comment today that I want to bring up has to do with the crosswalk on Chestnut Street across the highway here. And I mentioned this at a meeting before, and one of the things that I brought up was that with the community center ramping up September, October, and my understanding is extremely busy. commercial development on the other side of the highway, and our promotion of walkable, safe neighborhoods. I'm really concerned about that crosswalk. And during Summerfest, I had the opportunity just to volunteer, and I was watching, and I had some sort of empirical data that I just sort of thought I want to make sure that I sort of knew what I was talking about. And for the 2.5 hours I was there that one Saturday morning, there were 28 families that used that crosswalk. They pushed the button. The cars stopped in a timely fashion 21 times out of 28. Not a good mark for a crosswalk. My concern is that once again, that commercial development starts going, the community center starts ramping up, it's a hub of our community, we are going to have an exponential increase in pedestrian traffic. And I fear and I feel that, and I'm sure there's a standard that's been met, but considering the amount of people that are going to be using that crosswalk, there was one situation where young person came up to that crosswalk, pushed the button, the lights went off, and they just started. Now, it may have been their fault, but the car just did not stop. Nothing. I mean, they did stop in time, but I just felt, again, just cringed when I sort of saw that. And I'm not a traffic expert by any means, which I'm going to ask Jeff, but I think one of the things that needs to be looked at is that the fact you've got flashing lights over sidewalks, and those yellow flashing lights, to me, so a lot of people who use that highway aren't residents of this community. And what happens is that when I see yellow flashing lights at the side of the road, I'm thinking service truck. I'm not thinking crosswalk. Especially if I don't live in this community. And I don't know if it's even a matter of education. So what I'm asking for is perhaps, and I'm going to ask some comments for Jeff, if I may, is perhaps if we could perhaps look at that, considering the fact that that crosswalk is going to be used a lot more than it's being used now, and whether or not there needs to be any enhancements to that. Thank you.
And through the mayor, so there is different levels of crosswalk available. They are all laid out in the Ontario traffic manual. There is an upgrade that can be applied to that crossing. And basically, and again, there's a lot to the signage and there's a lot to the markings on the road. But really what it comes down to is the next grade up does create yellow flashing lights over top of the lane of traffic. The idea right now over top of the lane of traffic, we have signs that indicate that it's a crosswalk. So those signs, then there's a yellow flashing light that can be added there. I certainly can look into that. I can look into the costs that would be associated with that and bring that back to council. It is, and again, I certainly acknowledge that it is a provincial highway, or provincial highway that traffic that uses it. And it is going to, as we open up the commercial center, there is going to be more of a reliance on that crosswalk. So I don't think it's unreasonable to look at bringing it up to the standards of the top of the line crosswalk that is available through the Ontario traffic manual. So I would say that I could bring something back to council, and maybe it's in as we go forward into the budget process in the fall. Certainly could be added for sure.
I'm wondering, Madam Mayor, if we can put that on business arising or to make sure that it does not get lost. Is that possible? All right. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jeff. No, I'm just hoping that it's, if I may, I'm just hoping that it gets looked at. I don't believe it's something that we should be sitting on at all. And I think the sooner the better, quite frankly. So thank you.
Deputy Mayor Manders.
I don't mind it going on business arising, but eventually on business arising, I'll probably ask that it just go to budget, like being asked, like we look into it, a budget. I like the idea, but just have it be a budget item as opposed to every council meeting saying we're going to look at it at budget. But that's, but I like the idea. I think, and I was glad, change our infrastructure because of driver ignorance too. I'm a little bit concerned about. I was glad to hear it worked, when they hit the button and stuff like that. That definitely is an extra level of protection, having the overhanging lights. So I like the idea of looking into the cost of retrofitting that or looking at that. But I was glad to hear they were working. I was glad it was working. That everything you said was more, to me, was more driver ignorance. So, but anyways, but just a comment.
Any other counselor comments?
I have
Counselor Rick,
one more.
sorry, I
Sorry.
didn't know that you had more than one.
I just had one. I just had a question about the new online booking system for the community center and how that was working. If I may, Paul, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you through Madam Mayor. It's actually working very well. People are getting on there, no problem, and nonstop bookings coming in, and it's resulted in the ice usage this summer being very busy. So people are able to find those free times in the evenings and the weekends where during the winter season they haven't been able to, and they're just picking them up left, right, and center. So it's fantastic.
Okay, thank you. I guess if I may, I was just wondering about like, people booking the rooms. People make the rooms that we put in there, everything's starting to. I'm just looking to see whether things ramped up or not. So I'm just interested.
Absolutely, it has. And for some of those like big events, we ask people like to call to the office still for those ones because
Okay.
they require setup instructions and it's just more efficient that way.
All right. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am done.
Okay, any other counselor comments? So I just had, oh, sorry, yeah, Jeff, sorry.
Madam Mayor, if I might, we did talk about earlier, when it was my turn, one of the questions, and I was able to bring it up quite quickly. So in the DC charges, we've outlined 24% is going to the existing users, and 76% of the expansion would be going to DCs. And that does include in the new DCs, there is an amount that goes to carrying charges.
And is that for the, like, the Chestnut portion of it, right?
And that's correct. That's for, yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you for getting that so quickly. So I just had two. One is that Sunday, August 20th is the Biddulph Blanchard Fireman's Breakfast. And that's a Sunday, and I should have written down what time it starts. I think it starts at 7:30 or 8. It is by donation. So I would encourage everybody to mark their calendars to participate in that. And then council and some staff will be attending the AMO conference that this year is being held in London. And it actually kicks off on August 20th and runs until the 23rd. At this time, we do have one delegation, and that is with our good friend, the parliamentary assistant to the Minister of Infrastructure. So we will be bending his ear once again on infrastructure needs in Lucan Biddulph. So who knows? I know we had a couple of requests with some other ministries, and there's still time to slot us in. So hopefully we get some more, but at least we've got that. And we'll of course be reporting back in September on that. With that, we'll move on. There are no changes to budget. Any notices of motion? Okay, so we'll move on to our motions. We do have a motion in front of us, and this comes as a request from Councillor Regan at our last council meeting. It is fairly lengthy. It has to do with Highway Traffic Act amendments. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I would encourage anybody that's watching to go to our agenda to read it. But this, as I say, is a direct request from Councillor Regan and has to do with other similar motions that have been made by other municipalities across the province. So with that, I would ask for a mover and seconder for the motion in front of us. Councillor Regan and Deputy Mayor Manders. All in favor? And that's carried. We have 4 bylaws in front of us. Bylaw 34-2023 to authorize the borrowing upon amortizing debentures towards the cost of the Phase 2 Community Center project, Lucan Soccer Complex and the Lucan Pool. Bylaw 35-2023 to authorize the execution of an agreement with Tommy Codwell. Bylaw 36-2023 to authorize execution of an agreement with Lot Chansom. Bylaw 37-2023, the confirming bylaw for today's August 8th council meeting. So if no one cares to speak to bylaws 34-2023 through 37-2023 inclusive on their first, second, and third reading, that they be considered to have been read a first time and passed, read a second time and passed, and read a third time and passed. A mover and a seconder for that, please. Deputy Mayor Manders and Councillor Regan. All in favor? And that's carried. And we are adjourning at 6 minutes after 11. And a reminder then that we will not meet until August 5th, I believe it, or September 5th, right? The Tuesday right after the long weekend. A mover and a seconder for our adjournment, please. Councillor Regan and Deputy Mayor Manders, all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Have a good rest.